Hello everyone, and thanks for joining me today. Today I'm going to shift gears or shift back to the my Yoga Sutra series. So if you haven't seen it already, go back and watch the video on Sutra 1.1 because that's going to have a little bit of more information on Sutra 1.2 because these tend to flow together and there's a little bit of narrative to all of them as they're strung along. By the way, if you're not familiar with what a sutra is, sutra in Sanskrit means thread. So think of the sutras as a whole bunch of threads woven together to create a tapestry. Oh, the imagery. So, first two, let's see, Yoga Chittavritti Narota. I think that's what that says. This basically says yoga is a control, Narota, regulation, channeling. So basically, a lot of yogic words, they have like 10 meanings per word. Sanskrit's not a very descriptive language. So, because like I said, so many, one word can mean so many different things, like English. Like, you hear the read, it can mean to read a bunch of letters, or it could be a plant. Um, so the regulation, channeling, mastery, integration, coordination, blah, 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 of the modifications, gross, subtle thought patterns of the mind field. So there's actually a whole lot of stuff to unpack in this verse. So yoga is the control. So yoga actually in Sanskrit means union, or it technically means a yoke, right? And it's kind of the yoke that, not from an egg, but the yoke that you put on an ox. So really the metaphor of yoga is taking the consciousness and joining the mind to the soul. It's like you're yoking. And so when you do that, you actually get everything to work in unison, right? And so yoga is the control. So Naroda basically means to control something, right? All of these synonyms and the modifications, and that's what a vritti is. So I put together kind of like an analogy. So it's the moon reflecting in the pond analogy. And basically what that means is, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more, but think of the moon as the mind, and the pond is a perception. And the pond, and actually the pond and the surface of the pond is like your thought patterns. And so when your thought patterns are disturbed, they're moving all over the place, you can't focus, the image of the moon is going to be distorted. But when you calm these down and the surface is clear, then the true image or the true perception comes through. And this is really what the sutra is talking about. And I got some bullet points here. So first of all, I want you to know you are not the mind. That is one of the biggest misconceptions that I see in yoga, or actually in general. It's like, and this is more of like a Western ideas. A lot of people associate their identity with their internal dialogue. Now, in yoga, there are two forms of matter, the manifested and the unmanifested. And yoga treats everything else other than awareness as matter. This includes all thoughts, objects, and their associations. So really, when we're talking about your existence in your mind, really you have your soul, and your soul is called the Atma, and the Atma is just pure awareness. And everything else, including thoughts, emotions, objects, and all of that is matter. And so what happens is a thought comes into the mind, and what it does is it churns up all of the waters of the emotions, and the emotions come up, and this is what compels us to act. And you actually see this in the Vedic astrology birth chart. I mean, it's really, when we're talking about a planetary transit or a planet goes retrograde, that's really the astrology stirring the waters of the pond and muddying the actual surface. But when you do yoga and you're actually detached, it actually allows you to transcend the Vedic astrology birth chart. You actually transcend the karma. So the karma doesn't have as much of a reactionary effect, and you get to actually develop what's called the Kriya Yoga Siddhi. And we'll talk about that later on down the road. That is the power to manifest and control your own karma. And that takes a lot of years of meditation. And I tell you, once you learn how to do it, it's freaking great. So the key to the sutra is settling the streams of thought in the mind so that the nature of reality comes clear like the moon reflecting in the pond. And let me tell you, this is kind of a personal story. My own experience with Vritti Naroda, this happened to me about, I don't know how long ago it was. It was probably about 7 years ago that I first experienced Vritti Naroda, where the thought sensation actually stopped. And it is one of the weirdest, it's one of the weirdest sensations that you'll ever experience, especially especially if you have a very chatty mind, like you have a lot of planets in Gemini or in the air signs, and your mind is really chatty. When that internal dialogue calms down and subsides, you finally become aware of all of the stuff that you were shouting or shutting out before. Shouting out is kind of another metaphor because your mind is shouting and you can't pay attention to what's going on around you. Actually, I'd imagine that's probably what it's like to be autistic because all the sensory input starts flooding into your mind and you're just like, whoa. And all of a sudden you notice all this like, like the sound that the light makes, the noise of the traffic. It changes your whole mentality. And that's when the real work begins, okay? Because we're only on like Sutra 2 out of like 250. So here's a practical application. So I want to start doing this in my Yoga Sutra series. So start a meditation routine. 10 minutes a day is good to start. Really, ideally, I tell people to meditate twice a day for a half hour. If you can actually fit that in, that is the optimal time to make the most practice. But if you could set aside 10 minutes a day to start getting into the habit, that is more important. Like if you go back to Sutra 1, it talks about here now begins the practice of yoga. When you start practicing meditation, the intention and following through with it actually changes your karma. And really, I mean, the intention is important too, because whenever you have an intention, it plants a seed of karma in your mind, and that will come to fruition at some point. All your intentions have consequences, so keep that in mind. Be careful of how you think. Don't think wrong. Will the earth explode? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, get a copy of the Yoga Sutras, if you have not done so already. So the one that I showed in my first video by Swami Satchidananda, that's a good one. Just kind of start reading through it, kind of get an idea. And I mean, it'll give you an idea. Really, it'll introduce you to the full breadth and scope of the Yoga Sutras. Look over the websites I gave in the first video. So if you want to check out my Yoga Sutras blog, or if you want to go to swamij.com, that's a very great site for yoga too. And remember, yoga is an intuitive practice, not an intellectual concept. Well, it's an intellectual concept, but all things have to start as an intellectual concept. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to communicate them to other people, right? So we need things to be put into idea form so I can give it to you so you can start using it for yourself. And once you start doing the practice, the intuition of what things actually are will come into focus. Really, yoga is something that you have to experience. It's something that it's very subjective too. So as we go through these sutras, no two yogic experiences are really the same. It really all depends on your karma. And when you actually start getting into the meditation, you start peeling away all the layers of your subconscious mind. Really, the strongest samskara is going to come to the top the first, and that really depends on your birth chart. So when you're looking at the birth chart, if you see like oppositions or planets that are 90 degrees from each other, squared each other, that's where you see the difficult karma, okay? The good karma, you're probably not going to notice because you take it for granted. So anyway, so yeah, that's all I had for you today. So yeah, if you want to contact me, all social media links are below. Otherwise, like, subscribe, share, 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 mash that like button. That seems what everybody's saying right now. So don't mash it. I don't want you to break your computer. Just like. All right. Have a good day, and hopefully I will see you tomorrow.